Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Washington today. He's there to get more weapons, including the long-range Tomahawk missile. But before he could make the pitch, Trump got a phone call. On the other side was Russian President Vladimir Putin. The call lasted for more than 2 hours and Trump's tone shifted. Zelensky may or may not get the missiles, but Putin is getting a summit in Europe. We'll tell you more about it. Trump has also flipped the script in Gaza. From saying that Hamas violence does not bother him, he is now threatening to kill them. In Pakistan, Defence Minister Khwaja Asif has blamed India for the clashes with the Taliban. Also in focus, why gold prices are surging and whether you should invest in it now. Why Bangladesh's new charter is controversial. Why the International Monetary Fund has issued a strong warning about global debt. And the story of Diwali and how it is celebrated across different religions and cultures. All this and more lined up. The headlines first. It's a shot in the arm for the Indian Air Force. The first Tejas Mark 1A fighter aircraft from Nashik in Maharashtra completes its maiden flight. This took place in the presence of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. The formal induction of the jet into the Indian Air Force will depend on the successful completion of ongoing trials. Venezuela deploys thousands of troops near the Colombian border. This is in response to US military buildup in the Caribbean. In recent weeks, Washington has launched a series of deadly naval strikes in the Caribbean Sea. Caracas fears the US wants to overthrow the Nicolas Maduro government. China expels its second senior-most general and 8 other high-ranking military officials. Beijing has launched a corruption probe against them. 8 of the 9 individuals have also been removed from China's ruling Communist Party. This comes just days before the party's top leaders meet in Beijing. An army colonel is sworn in as Madagascar's new president. This comes just days after he led the military takeover that forced the former president to flee the country. Anger over chronic power cuts in the island nation had sparked protests last month, which escalated into a mass movement. And in Mongolia, lawmakers oust the country's prime minister just 4 months after he took office. He was under fire over a major shift in the country's minerals policy. Mongolia borders Russia and China and is rich in natural resources such as coal, gas and minerals. Ukraine's President Zelensky is in Washington today. It's a high-stakes visit for him. We are entering the winter months in Ukraine, so now is the time to make some gains. And Zelensky came prepared. He brought his suit. He readied his pitch. He brought his A game. And then came a googly all the way from Russia, a surprise phone call. Hours before Zelensky landed, Russian President Putin dialed Donald Trump. They spoke for almost 2.5 hours, and after that, everything changed. The mood, the tone, the agenda, all of it shifted in favor of Moscow. The day began with all the focus on Zelensky. It ended with Trump announcing that he would meet Putin. So what exactly happened in that call? Well, here's the background. Trump has been losing patience with Russia recently. He thought that his meeting with Putin would end the war. But 2 months later, there is no progress, so he's lashing out. First, he targeted countries buying oil from Russia, India being one of them. Then he started sharing US intelligence on Russian assets. This enabled Ukraine to target Russian oil facilities. Nearly 20% of Moscow's capacity has been hit. And then this month, Trump floated a new idea. What if the US sold Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine? These are high-speed cruise missiles. They can travel at 70% the speed of sound. More importantly, they fly at lower altitudes, meaning they're hard to intercept. These missiles have a range of over 1,600 kilometers. They can easily hit Moscow from Ukraine. So recently, Trump suggested giving these missiles to Ukraine, and Russia was livid. Putin said it would mark an escalation by the US. Of course, Zelensky was thrilled. He was flying to Washington to seal the Tomahawk deal. And on cue, Putin dialed Trump. After that call, the US president changed his tune. He became non-committal on the missiles. He says the US cannot deplete its own stock.
We need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, you know, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them, too. And I thought it was a very good phone call. I thought very productive. But I'll be meeting with President Putin, and we'll make a determination. Tomorrow I'm meeting with President Zelensky, and I'll be telling him about the call.
So Trump will meet Putin again, this time in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. Technically, Hungary is NATO soil, but in reality, it is neutral turf. Their prime minister is Viktor Orban. He is a close friend of Putin. He has already started planning the summit. Viktor Orban says Hungary will be an island of peace. Now, symbolically, this is a big win for Putin, because Budapest is also a European Union capital. The EU has been trying to isolate Putin for years. He hasn't visited a single EU country since the war began. But pretty soon, he will be welcomed in Hungary, that too for a grand summit with the US president. So symbolically, this is a big victory for the Russians. But strategically, well, it's not clear yet. The Kremlin sounded positive after Putin's call with Trump.
What we do have is the willingness of the presidents to hold such a meeting. But first, the matter will be taken up by Foreign Minister Lavrov and Secretary of State Rubio. They will first hold a call and meet to begin discussing the topic and all related issues. The meeting could indeed take place within 2 weeks or slightly later. There is a shared understanding that it should not be put off.
A lot depends on the meeting tonight. Just a while from now, Trump will host Zelensky at the White House. It's their third meeting in the same setting. The first ended in a shouting match. The second was extremely warm. So let's see how this third one goes. Zelensky will be hoping for more military sales. Chances are he will lobby hard for the Tomahawk missiles, but all eyes will be on Donald Trump. The US president believes he's on a roll. He's fresh off a successful peace summit in West Asia. He wants to use that momentum in Ukraine. But this is a different ballgame. You see, in Gaza, Trump had a lot of leverage on both sides. He could pressure Israel directly, and he could pressure Hamas via his Arab allies. But in this case, in the case of Ukraine, Trump has little to no leverage over Russia. But he does have a lot of leverage over Kyiv. So it will be tempting for Donald Trump to enforce a peace deal on Ukraine. He has resisted that temptation so far. Let's see if that changes tonight. Donald Trump prides himself on deal-making. He claims to have ended 8 wars, not 1, not 2, but 8 wars. His latest accolade is a ceasefire in Gaza. It is currently holding. Hostages and prisoners are being swapped, and Trump calls it the dawn of a new West Asia. But there is trouble looming. Donald Trump is threatening attacks on Hamas. Look at his Truth Social post first. This is what he says. If Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. The message is blunt and very Trumpian. The US president says Hamas is killing people in Gaza, and that was not part of the deal. So he's asking them to stop. And if they don't stop, the US will kill them. That's what Trump has said. So a week ago, there was talk of peace, but now Trump is threatening US firepower. So what went wrong here? To understand that, you have to look inside Gaza. The bombs may have stopped, but Hamas has launched a violent crackdown. It is targeting local gangs and militias. Hamas accuses them of looting aid and even collaborating with Israel. Several horrific videos have emerged from the Gaza Strip. They show Hamas executing men in public squares. Gazans are terrified, but Hamas says it is just restoring order, and that these gangs are a threat to Gaza's stability. Stamping them out is part of rebuilding Hamas control. And at first, Trump did not seem to mind any of it.
Also, they said they were going to disarm. And initially speaking, they did take out a couple of gangs that were very bad, very, very bad gangs, and they did take them out. And they killed a number of gang members. And that didn't bother me much, to be honest with you. That's okay.
He says it did not bother him much. And he won't use the US military to disarm Hamas.
To the rest of the world that at some point the U.S. military may more directly engage?
We won't need the U.S. military. We won't need it.
Why not just yield?
Because we're very much involved in it. If we weren't involved, there wouldn't be peace.
But within 24 hours, Trump's position has changed. He now says the Hamas purge is not part of the peace deal.
If they continue keep killing innocents in Gaza, if that continues, the United States will go after them.
I issued a strong statement. That's right.
But they used to be gangs, and now you're saying innocents. What made you think they're innocents now?
Well, I'm looking at what's happening, and that wasn't the deal that was made, and we'll see what happens.
So what made the US president do a U-turn on Hamas? Well, part of it seems to be pressure from Israel, from Washington hawks, and from headlines painting Gaza's new order as a reign of terror. Trump realized that the narrative was slipping away from him. This was supposed to be his victory lap. Instead, there are videos of executions, and Hamas looks like it is running Gaza again. Hence the stark warning from Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Israel already accuses Hamas of violating the peace plan. They say Hamas failed to hand over all hostages, especially within the 72-hour window.
It's a tough situation. They brought back bodies today, as you probably know. But they also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave good, if they don't behave, we'll take care of it.
Which brings us to the big question. Will Hamas disarm? It is part of Trump's peace deal. It says Hamas should give up its weapons and leave the Strip. They must step away from governance. And this is not something that Hamas has agreed to. We asked the Egyptian foreign minister about this today, about Hamas disarming and giving up political ambitions. Listen to what he had to say.
This agreement was reached to be implemented. And the main guarantee for that is the involvement and the engagement of President Trump himself and the United States. This is the Trump peace plan, and everybody should, honor.
Will you think they will? Are you in touch with Israel and Hamas?
We hope so. We are in touch, and we are, President Sisi, when he received President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, he spoke about the American commitments, and President Trump, he said, I'm fully committed to follow up, to make sure of the implementation of first phase, and now to start the negotiation about the second phase. And we are expecting the two parties to honor their own commitments, because we have no other option. Ending the war should be sustainable. This is the only game in town, and we have to move forward with the implementation of the Trump plan.
Well, hope is not a strategy, plus power vacuums do not last, especially in West Asia. Hamas has been weakened by the war, but it hasn't been destroyed yet. And that reality puts Washington in an awkward spot. For aid and rebuilding to happen, someone needs to enforce order, and like it or not, that someone is still Hamas. Where does this leave Trump's new West Asia? The ceasefire still holds technically. The press releases still say progress. But Gaza's streets tell another story. Hamas is still in charge, Israel is still suspicious, and Trump is still talking about going in. His so-called new West Asia was meant to be a blueprint for stability, but right now it looks more like a fragile truce held together by threats and uncertainty. And that is the paradox of Trump's deal-making. He promises peace, but he keeps the option of war on speed dial. From one ceasefire to another, this one is at the Afghan-Pakistan border. It was brokered just 48 hours ago, but tonight it lies in ruins. A suicide bomber drove into a convoy of Pakistani troops. 7 soldiers are dead. Pakistan has confirmed the attack. It hasn't named the Taliban yet, but the timing is hard to ignore. For the last few weeks, both sides traded fire across the Durand Line. The Durand Line is a colonial border, a border that Afghanistan never recognized. Now, they've been fighting along this border. Kabul says Pakistan hit civilian areas. Islamabad insists it targeted terrorist sanctuaries. Last week, it was Pakistan that lit the fuse. It launched airstrikes on Kabul. Over the weekend, the Taliban hit back. What followed was a bloody exchange. Pakistan said it killed over 200 Taliban fighters. The Taliban said they killed 58 Pakistani soldiers. Now, it's hard to verify either claim, but we can tell you that the situation remains tense. And amid all the smoke and shattered ceasefires, Pakistan is back to its favorite national pastime, blaming India. Once again, it features their defense minister, Khwaja Asif. He went on television and made this bizarre claim.
I have my doubts that the ceasefire will hold because the Afghan Taliban are being sponsored by Delhi. Right now, Kabul is fighting a proxy war for Delhi.
Basically, Khwaja Asif says Kabul is fighting a proxy war for Delhi. You heard that right. And not just that, Khwaja Asif also says that Pakistan is ready for a two-front war. Well, that's good confidence, I would say, given that Islamabad sued for peace after Operation Sindoor. Also, the Taliban, Pakistan's longtime Frankenstein, is now apparently India's cat's paw. Irony dies 1,000 deaths here. This is the same Taliban that Pakistan armed, trained and sheltered. It gave them a sanctuary in Quetta. It trained them in Waziristan. It was the first country to recognize the first Taliban regime back in the 90s. And then came the second one. In 2021, when the Taliban seized Kabul, Islamabad was the first to celebrate. Pakistan called it a strategic victory. But 4 years later, that strategic asset has turned into a strategic threat. Pakistan says the Taliban have switched sides and that India has somehow flipped them. It's a crazy delusion even by Pakistan standards. They literally built the Taliban and now they can't believe that the same Taliban is no longer taking their orders. So they've been fighting. And in the middle of that fight, a visit happened. The Taliban foreign minister came to India. His name is Amir Khan Muttaqi. He was in India for a week. It was the first official visit by a Taliban leader to New Delhi. So Pakistan's paranoia went into overdrive. They fear that India is expanding its influence in Kabul. But the fact is, their border tensions and their problems in general have nothing to do with India. For decades, Pakistan played a double game. They supported America's war on terror while secretly arming the Taliban next door. Their sinister logic was this: a friendly Taliban regime would keep India out of Afghanistan. Well, that plan worked for about 5 minutes. Then it backfired. Today, that same friendly regime sees Pakistan as a problem. Kabul has accused Pakistan of helping the ISIS-K, the ISIS Khorasan, that's Islamic State in this part of the world. They are the Taliban's sworn enemy. Afghanistan says Pakistan is using the ISIS-K to destabilize their country. Of course, Pakistan has dismissed these claims, but it has failed to restore trust. And that manifests in frequent border clashes. Will it escalate into a full-blown war? Well, as of today, it's unlikely. The Taliban do not have the air power or the hardware to take on Pakistan. But border skirmishes and proxy battles will continue. Neither side trusts the other. And that makes it a bitter reckoning for Pakistan. For years, they exported terrorism to their neighbors. Now terror has found its way back home. So again, this is not India's proxy war. This is Pakistan's own past coming back to claim its due. Conflicts, trade wars, and a growing sense of unease. That's the mood driving the global economy today. Fresh signs of strain are emerging, and that pressure is showing up in gold prices. This week, it touched a new record. Gold prices surged past $4,100 in the global market, and that's a first. Gold has appreciated by more than 50% this year. That means if you invested $1,000 in gold, today your investment is worth $1,500. That's a profit of $500. And here in India, gold prices have been on a tear. Today, it reached 130,000 rupees, 1,30,000 rupees for 10 grams of gold in the futures market. What does that mean? What's the futures market? A futures trade basically means that traders pay the cost today for gold that will be delivered on a future date. Usually, traders use a futures contract. This is a way of placing a bet on gold prices and making money off speculation. Also, observers did not see the spike coming. Prices have risen too quickly and far beyond predictions. In places like Sydney, buyers are queuing up outside gold dealers. They are purchasing gold in bulk. This is true for central banks as well. Through the year this time, central banks have bought 64 tons of gold every month. 64 tons of gold every month. In August, countries like Kazakhstan, Turkey, Bulgaria and China boosted their gold reserves. In fact, these large purchases are one of the reasons why gold prices are rising so rapidly. Even India's RBI is riding this trend. That's the Reserve Bank of India. It's India's central bank. Do you know how much gold the RBI has bought this year? In this financial year, they've added gold worth $19 billion to their reserves. And here's where this becomes even more significant, this trend. While the RBI is adding to its gold reserves, it is cutting back on US government debt. It is reducing exposure to American government bonds. Let me show you some data. Last year, the RBI held bonds worth $242 billion. These are US government bonds, $242 billion. In June this year, this investment slipped. It dropped to less than $230 billion. During the same period, the bank increased its holdings in gold. In the month of August, the RBI had 888 tons of gold, which is a record high. It makes the Reserve Bank of India the 9th biggest holder of gold among central banks. This is a clear step towards diversification, and this was confirmed by India's finance minister, that's Nirmala Sitharaman. She issued a statement last month. She said, and I'm quoting, "The RBI was taking a very considered decision to diversify reserves." And this shift is revealing. You see, when risk goes up, so does demand for gold. And right now, the risks are stacking up. The US dollar is under pressure. It is headed for its worst week since July. Investors are moving away from it. They're turning to safer options like the Swiss franc, the yen, and of course, gold. Then there's trouble in regional US banks. There are growing concerns around trade. And the US economy is showing signs of weakness. Major releases of economic data are delayed because the US government has shut down. So that has blocked access to key numbers. Overall, investors have less confidence, and this is pushing them to protect their holdings. Many of them are turning to gold. So what does this mean for future prices? Should you be buying at current prices? Will gold become more expensive going forward, or will prices fall? Well, the projections are mixed. HSBC has raised the price forecast for 2025 and 2026. It expects a bullish sentiment around gold, one that will carry forward to next year. Australia's ANZ Bank has released its own projection. It expects gold prices to keep rising well into 2026 and to peak by June 2026. After that, prices may dip in the second half of the year. That is, if the larger geopolitical and economic climate improves. Remember, India marks Dhanteras tomorrow. India celebrates Dhanteras tomorrow. It marks the start of Diwali festivities, and buying gold is a common practice on this day. It is seen as a symbol and a harbinger of fortune. This year, while gold is beyond reach for most people, some may still buy it, and the festive demand may drive up prices further. But for those who are looking to make a quick buck from this rally, the advice is to hold on. Now is not the time to gamble with gold. Our next story is from South America, where Donald Trump continues to target Venezuela. The latest is a military strike. The US carried out the strike in the Caribbean today. It hit a suspected drug boat near Venezuela's coast. This is the 6th such strike since September and the 2nd this week. What began as a counter-narcotics operation is now spiraling into a bigger clash. The White House says it is taking on narco-terrorists. Venezuela says the US strikes are illegal. In fact, it has taken the matter to the United Nations now. Our next report has more.
Tensions between US and Venezuela are at their peak. What began as a war on drug traffickers has now turned into one of the most dangerous flashpoints in Latin America. Military strikes, covert Central Intelligence Agency operations, and accusations of regime change. This week, the tensions escalated even further. The US conducted 2 strikes in the Caribbean region. The most recent strike happened on Thursday. U.S. forces attacked a small boat near Venezuela's coast. It's not the first time. The U.S. has carried out at least 5 similar strikes before. Thursday's was the 6th. It's part of an operation targeting vessels that Washington claims are carrying drugs. And for the first time since that campaign began, there were reportedly survivors. Reports say officials confirmed survivors were on board, but the Pentagon has given no details so far. This followed another deadly strike on Tuesday. At least 27 people have been killed since the operations began in September. Until now, every targeted vessel was destroyed completely, leaving no one alive. Washington calls the campaign necessary. President Donald Trump says it targets narco-terrorists. He accuses Venezuela of fueling drug flows to the U.S. and claims Caracas has released its prisoners into America, but no evidence has been made public to support those claims. In a major escalation, Trump has now confirmed he authorized the CIA. For what? To conduct covert operations inside Venezuela. He is also considering land operations. The White House says the goal is to break up drug cartels. The aim is also to weaken President Nicolas Maduro's government.
I think President Trump believes that Nicolas Maduro is an illegitimate president leading an illegitimate regime that has been trafficking drugs to the United States of America for far too long, and we're not going to tolerate it.
The U.S. military buildup is also expanding in the Caribbean. At least 8 warships are now patrolling the region. A nuclear-powered submarine has been deployed too. Fighter jets and thousands of troops are stationed there as well. But criticism is mounting in Washington. Lawmakers say they were never asked to authorize this campaign, and many admit they know little about it. In fact, Venezuela is pushing back hard too. It has accused Washington of carrying out extrajudicial executions. It has been carrying out military exercises, and it has demanded the UN Security Council to investigate the strikes.
What do we ask of the Security Council? First, that it investigates the series of murders that the government of the United States of America has been perpetrating in our region and determines their illegal nature. Second, to confirm the threat that these illicit actions pose to the preservation of peace in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Meanwhile, President Maduro says the CIA authorization proves the U.S. is trying to overthrow his government. The U.S. says its actions are legal under Article 51 of the UN Charter. But Venezuela says that justification is fabricated. What's unfolding is no longer about narcotics. It's about legitimacy, control, and just how far American power can reach.
It was a big day in Bangladesh. Interim ruler Mohammad Yunus presided over a crucial signing. Signing a what? Bangladesh's new July Charter. Think of it as a quasi-constitution. It details the powers of elected officials. It lists out the country's guiding principles. It also mandates reforms and policies. The only problem? It's a handshake agreement. This document was not drafted by elected officials. It was not deliberated on by a constituent assembly, and the drawbacks are evident. This new charter conveniently ignores a lot of Bangladeshi history that created and shaped this country. Simply put, it's a revisionist document. Just look at who was consulted. Yunus chaired the committee that drafted this charter. They consulted 33 political parties. I know that sounds like a lot, 33 parties, but do remember 28 registered political parties were also kept out. And these are not just parties linked to Sheikh Hasina. Many of them were independent parties. Yet Yunus kept them out. Several parties also boycotted the signing today. They say the charter does not reflect the national consensus. Just look at the numbers. 84 reform pledges are part of the charter. Only 1/3 were agreed to by all parties. The remaining have notes of dissent. And if you look at the fine print, it's clear why. The charter completely excludes the 1990 uprising. This was a mass protest against the dictatorship of H.M. Irshad. Parties across the country took part in it. Sheikh Hasina played a key role in organizing young protesters, and eventually they succeeded. The dictatorship gave way to multi-party democracy in Bangladesh. That uprising finds no mention in this charter. It talks about the partition of British India in 1947. It mentions the language movement of the 1950s. It details the liberation story of the 1970s, but no mention of the 1990s uprising. Even in the liberation story, some aspects are missing. In March 26, 1971, Bangladesh issued its Declaration of Independence. It was broadcast by Awami League officials on behalf of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. That declaration is not part of the charter. Same with the Proclamation of Independence. This was issued on April 10, 1971. That too in the middle of Pakistan's genocide. It formed the basis of a future government in Dhaka, again excluded from the charter. The leftist parties in Bangladesh also have another complaint. They say that the country's founding principles have been ignored, like secularism, democracy, and socialism. And this complaint emerged earlier this year as well. The committee had dropped the word secularism from the charter. Instead, they inserted the word pluralism. Apparently, that's how you protect religious minorities, by scrapping secularism from your charter. Now, all these controversial moves raise a larger question. What is the legality of this charter? Is this the new rule book of Bangladesh? Again, no one knows. The country's constitution has not been scrapped. So this is basically an extra rule book, a rule book that cannot even be challenged. Because the charter says its validity cannot be challenged in courts, meaning citizens can either take it or leave it. Is this Muhammad Yunus's grand promise of democracy, a so-called charter that dilutes Bangladesh's legacy? Now, we're not saying the country did not need changes. Some of the ideas are actually good, like curbing the powers of the Prime Minister or ensuring the independence of regulators. But reform does not mean abandoning your past, nor does it mean unilaterally making changes. Ideally, all of this should have happened after the election, once the people have expressed their will. But as always, Yunus has put the cart before the horse. Now let's talk about OpenAI and its CEO Sam Altman. He has reignited the debate on big tech's role in society. Sam Altman says, and I'm quoting, "They are not the elected moral police of the world." And what triggered this comment? A change in OpenAI's user policies. They've allowed adult content on ChatGPT. They say they can manage the risks, but reports suggest otherwise. In fact, the newest version of ChatGPT is giving more harmful answers than ever. There are serious safety concerns. And the problem, in fact, is not limited to OpenAI. Google's chatbot once told a student to, quote unquote, "please die." During the Rohingya crisis, Facebook was blamed for fueling hate in Myanmar. Big tech empowers people, but it also endangers. That has been the trend. And when it comes to the basics, like protecting users, ensuring safety, or curbing abuse, it falls short. These are companies that have the resources, they have the talent, the data. What they lack is perhaps intention. Maybe the problem is not capability, maybe it is conscience. Our next report has more.
Big tech has all the resources in the world. They have the money, the talent, the computing power, and the global reach. But here's the question: why can't they solve basic problems? From misinformation to mental health to safety for children online. They're failing, despite everything at their disposal. So is this a resource problem or a skill set problem? OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is making headlines. He said, and this is a quote, "We are not the elected moral police of the world." The statement came after backlash over a new policy allowing erotica on ChatGPT. The company says the content will be limited to verified adults, and that restrictions can now be safely relaxed, thanks to new tools and safety upgrades. But that promise is already under fire, as new tests have revealed something troubling. The latest ChatGPT model, GPT-5, was more likely to give harmful responses when asked about suicide, self-harm, and eating disorders. Researchers fed it 120 prompts. The new version gave harmful answers 63 times The previous one was 52. That's a rise. And for users in crisis, that difference matters. But this is not just about OpenAI. In November last year, Google faced a major embarrassment. Its AI chatbot, Gemini, sent a threatening message to a student. The message said, and we quote, "You are a burden on society, please die." How does a system this powerful get something this basic so dangerously wrong? And this isn't a new problem. Big tech's failure to protect users goes beyond recent AI innovations. Back in 2018, Facebook was accused of helping fuel a humanitarian crisis. UN investigators said the platform played a role in the genocide against the Rohingya in Myanmar. Their findings were clear. Facebook allowed hate speech to spread. The company promised action, but the damage was done. More than 650,000 people fled, thousands were killed, and social media had helped fan the flames. So here's the question again. What is big tech missing? It's not money, it's not headcount, and it's not computing power. Maybe they're missing a different kind of skill, one that doesn't come from code or algorithms. Maybe they're missing judgment, foresight, and a clear understanding of social risk. They've built products to scale, but not to care. They've built models that can think, but not feel. And systems that sound human, without any human context. They can detect language, but they still can't sense danger. They can predict behavior, but can't prevent harm. And even when warned, they move slow. Big tech has all the tools, but it still lacks one thing: the will to build for society, not just for growth.
The world is drowning in debt, and the bill is rising faster than ever. Every year, many governments spend more than they earn, and to fill that gap between earning and spending, they borrow money. Some of that money goes into schools and healthcare. Some is used to fund pensions and defense forces. And some is spent on rebuilding after disasters or for stabilizing economies during crises. Plus, of course, there are leakages. So put together, this is the money that a government spends. When it borrows more than the economy can handle, it becomes a problem. And that is exactly what is happening now. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, has sounded an alarm. The IMF is the global financial body which helps countries in trouble with loans and policy advice. And it has come up with a warning. Global public debt is about to cross a historic line. Public debt is the total amount of money that governments owe to lenders both at home and abroad. When we say global public debt, we mean the combined borrowing of all the world's governments put together. And that number is now heading into uncharted territory. The IMF says that by 2029, governments will owe more money. As of 2024, the global public debt stood at 93% of the GDP. By 2029, it is expected to surpass 100% of the global GDP. And in a worst-case scenario, it could even hit 123% of the GDP. That's a level not seen since after the Second World War. And that's a scenario we cannot ignore.
In a extreme but plausible scenario, with a 5% probability, that would reach 123% of GDP in 2029. So truly very high level. That leads to our policy recommendation that it's very important to prioritize fiscal policy right now.
But how did we get here? Well, the pandemic is a big part of the story. Governments spent massive amounts of money to keep economies afloat. They paid for healthcare, they provided job support, and they bailed out companies. At the same time, tax revenues collapsed as economies slowed. But that was just the start. Military spending surged as global tensions grew. Older populations are pushing up pension and healthcare costs, and climate disasters are costing billions to recover from. Then there's another big shift. For years, borrowing was cheap because interest rates were low. But now interest rates have surged. Paying back old loans is costing much more. And new debt is even harder to afford. The impact is already visible. Major economies are deep in debt. The United States, Japan, France, Canada, China and the UK, they've all passed or are about to pass the 100% mark. America's debt will likely exceed 140% of its GDP by 2029. China's will climb from 88% to 113%. And this is not just about numbers on paper. For many nations, the pressure has become too much to handle alone. Countries are turning to the IMF for help. Reports say 86 countries owe about $162 billion to the fund. Argentina tops this list. It's the biggest borrower. It owes $57 billion. And this comes as this country fights soaring inflation and a collapsing currency. Next on the list is Ukraine. They owe $14 billion to the IMF. And this as its economy has been battered by the war. Egypt is third. It owes over $9 billion. That's because it has borrowed repeatedly to stabilize its finances. And Pakistan is at number 4. Its government owes nearly $9 billion. Pakistan, in fact, has repeatedly sought bailout packages. Years of mismanagement and political instability have made it dependent on foreign lenders. And these are just some of the biggest borrowers. But the bigger risk is yet to come. The IMF warns that rising debt and shrinking fiscal space are together making economies weaker. If markets panic, the world could fall into what it calls a doom loop. High debt could trigger financial chaos, and that chaos could create even more debt. So what happens next? Well, the IMF says governments must act now. They need to cut deficits. They need to control spending, and they must invest in growth. They also need to build what is called fiscal buffers. That is money kept as a safety net for future crises. Because if they don't, this crisis won't just change balance sheets. It could change lives. It could change the future of the global economy. The season of Gen Z protests shows no sign of ending. From Madagascar to Indonesia, young people are on the streets. Tonight, our story is from Peru, a country in South America famous for Machu Picchu, but now in the headlines for protests. Thousands of people have poured into the streets. They say their government has failed them. They're fed up with rising crime, corruption, and broken promises. And they want politicians, including their new president, to step down. The government's response has been tough. A state of emergency could be declared soon. Security powers are being expanded, and the president is promising a crackdown. Our next report has more.
Peru is boiling. Its streets are filled with rage, frustration, and a generation that says it's had enough. For weeks now, thousands of young Peruvians, mostly Gen Z, have been marching. And they are not just protesting one president or one policy. They are protesting a system they believe is broken. It began with calls for better pensions and higher wages. But the movement quickly grew bigger. It became a rallying cry against soaring crime and deep corruption, and against a political class that many believe no longer represents them.
Extortion continues. Contract killings continue. The police do nothing. You are witnesses. The police keep repressing people who have come to exercise their right, a legitimate right to protest, and they're still repressing them.
That anger only deepened when President Dina Boluarte was impeached last week. She was one of the most unpopular leaders in the world. Her replacement, Jose Heri, the Speaker of Congress, became Peru's 7th president in less than a decade. But instead of calming tensions, his arrival made them worse. Protesters say he is part of the same corrupt system. They want him gone. They want Congress dissolved, and many want a new constitution. The protests have grown massive. University students, transport workers and civil groups have joined in. And the marches have turned into nationwide demonstrations. Then, on October the 15th, everything changed. During a huge protest outside Congress, a 32-year-old man was shot dead. CCTV shows a man firing a gun before fleeing. Prosecutors say he was shot in the chest. Police now admit one of their officers pulled the trigger. The officer has been detained and removed from duty. But the man's death turned the movement into a national crisis. What began as a protest over jobs and security is now a fight over police violence, state accountability and human rights. President Harry expressed regret, but he refused to resign. He blamed the chaos on delinquents who infiltrated the march, and he promised that the full force of the law would be used against them.
First, we regret the death yesterday of Eduardo, a 32-year-old. We stand with his family at this time. Yesterday a legitimate civic expression began, which, unfortunately as the hours went by, some sectors used to push an agenda to create chaos.
The government is also responding with other hardline measures. It says a state of emergency will be declared in Lima. It will allow security forces to be deployed, and it will restrict large gatherings. All this comes against the backdrop of a crime wave that has spiralled out of control. Extortion and contract killings are now daily realities. Gangs target bus drivers, shop owners and musicians. For many Peruvians, this is no longer just about politics, it's about safety. It's about justice, and it's about trust in their government. They want a new Peru that is safer, fairer and accountable.
The diyas are out, the sweets are stocked, and Instagram is ready. It's that time of the year again when India's streets are glittering. But Diwali, or Deepavali, which literally means a row of lamps, is not one tale. It is the culmination of many stories. Some versions say that in ancient India it started as a harvest festival. It is the day of the homecoming of Lord Ram, of course, the day of Mahavir's enlightenment. In West Bengal, it is also Kali Puja. In Punjab, it is Bandi Chor Divas. In India, this one festival has many faces and many stories. Our next report tells you the story of Diwali.
Before it became the grand celebration we know today, Diwali was a harvest festival. Farmers lit small oil lamps at dusk, thanking the sun for its energy and praying for the next crop. The lamps were offerings to light itself, a gesture of gratitude and renewal. Over time, these modest rituals were woven into grander mythologies. Sanskrit texts like the Padma Purana and Skanda Purana mention Deepotsav, a festival of lamps symbolizing joy and purity. By the 7th century, Emperor Harsha's play described towns glowing with lights. By the 11th century, travellers like Al-Biruni were writing about the Hindu festival of lamps. Diwali had become a phenomenon. For Hindus, Diwali is the moment when good quite literally triumphs over evil. When Lord Ram, after 14 years of exile and a fierce battle with the demon king Ravana, returns to his kingdom of Ayodhya. The people line the streets with lamps to welcome him. Every flickering flame represents the victory of righteousness over darkness. And across India, the goddess Lakshmi, symbol of wealth and prosperity, is invoked to bless homes and businesses. Shopkeepers open new account books. Families clean and decorate their homes. Gold, sweets and laughter change hands. For the Jain community, Diwali has nothing to do with victory in battle. It is a night of nirvana. On this day in 527 BCE, Lord Mahavira, the 24th Tirthankara, is believed to have attained liberation from the cycle of birth and death. The heavens, ancient texts say, were illuminated by countless lamps. That's why Jains light diyas, not to celebrate conquest, but to honour knowledge and spiritual freedom. For Sikhs, Diwali is known as Bandi Chor Divas, the Day of Liberation. In 1619, the 6th Sikh Guru, Hargobind Singh, was released from Mughal imprisonment at Gwalior Fort. He refused to leave until 52 captive kings were freed alongside him. When he returned to Amritsar, the city was illuminated in his honour. That's how Diwali became a day of justice and compassion for Sikhs. For some Buddhists, Diwali is about Emperor Ashoka's transformation after the Kalinga War. Once a conqueror, he turned to peace and embraced the teachings of Buddha. Neva Buddhists celebrate the festival much like their Hindu neighbours, with lamps, Lakshmi Puja and family feasts. It's a reminder that faith, like light, travels easily between homes and hearts. If you travel across India during Diwali, you'll find that every region adds its own flavour. Like in West Bengal, it's Kali Puja, where the goddess is worshipped through the night. Colonial officials in the 18th century marvelled at Diwali's splendour. British diaries describe streets glittering with oil lamps and houses filled with new garments and sweets. By the 20th century, Diwali became a national and global festival. In India, it marked unity beyond religion. In the diaspora, from Trinidad to Tobago, Diwali parades brought the festival to the streets of the world. Today, the celebration has gone digital. But strip away the myths, the rituals, the gold and the crackers, and what remains is a message as old as time. That light will always defeat darkness, and that is the story of Diwali.
Diwali also means one more thing. It is Son Papdi season. Our Indian audience needs no introduction to this sweet, but for everyone else, listen closely. Son Papdi is a flaky golden sweet. It's not just any part of Diwali. It is a Diwali institution. Go to any Indian home and they will have Son Papdi right now, not because they love the sweet, but because it is the perennial gift. Office Diwali party, take some Son Papdi. Friend's house party, take some Son Papdi again. It's a gift, an institution and a meme all at once. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thousands of mourners attend the state funeral for Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga. Lava flows as Hawaii's volcano erupts again, and a rhino celebrates its 4th birthday with a Pokemon party at a US zoo. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1973, oil cartel OPEC announced an embargo on oil exports. It cut exports to the US and other countries that were giving military aid to Israel during the Yom Kippur War. This led to oil prices soaring to unprecedented levels. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on Monday.